we are carrying on in our Hope series. So we're on part 2, and we are focusing today on the hope that we can find in God. We're thinking and learning about the hope that we know we can have, because the world sometimes seems a little bit hopeless. Our lives can sometimes feel a little bit lost and a little bit like wondering what's happening, where we're going and things like that. But we want to look as a church where we can find a hope that God has to offer, not maybe what the world wants to offer us. And today we're thinking about knowing and trusting God's plans and the hope that He wants to give us for our future. And when it comes to our thoughts about the future, you know, we all have different thoughts, we all have different approaches, don't we, on what we're facing. Some aspects might fill us with great joy. Alice has just passed a driving test. So she's now like, I can drive, I'm free. There are some things you might be facing, GCSEs or exams, and you might be thinking, oh no, what will the future hold? What if it doesn't quite go as I want it to? But I want to say to us this afternoon, whatever it is we face, God will give us a promise about our future. And we're going to turn to some words in the Bible that tell us about the kind of future that God has for us. So it should come up on the screen. There we go. So we're reading from Jeremiah 29. And I'm going to take us through verses 10 to 14. It says, "This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and I will fulfill my good promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. I will seek you, you will find me, when you seek me with all of your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and the places where I've banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile." So, these are some words that were written thousands of years ago, so you might be sort of reading and going, oh man, what does that mean? Well, a little bit of history, a little bit of context to help us understand why God said this. These words were spoken through a man, a prophet called Jeremiah. So a prophet is a messenger of God. And God's people had been taken from the land that they were promised to somewhere that they didn't belong. So they were living this great life, they were having this good time, they were following God, and then things went a little bit wrong, and God says, well, because of all the things you've done wrong, I'm going to take you captive, and you're going to end up in Babylon. And that's a place where the people in Babylon lived a complete opposite way of life. The Babylonians didn't worship the same God, they didn't follow the same laws and standards that the Israelites did. So it'd be a little bit like us today, something going wrong, and then another country saying, we're taking you captive. Can you imagine, like, you got taken to Saudi Arabia or Iraq or Iran, or it'd be a little bit like that, like, just looking at some of your faces and going, but that's exactly what it was like. It was like God said, okay, you're going to be taken captive, and it was a complete opposite. But as the Israelites enter this uncertain time, God gives a list in this passage of telling His people what is going to happen. He always reveals something of His plan to His people. So first of all, He says you're going to be captive for 70 years. And it did happen for 70 years. He says He will fulfill His promise to them, and He will take them back to the promised land of Jerusalem. He says that He's got a bigger plan to prosper them, not to harm them. So he tells them in a previous verse, as they've been taken captive, He says, okay, when you're in Babylon, don't stop living your life. He says, get married, have children, get a job, farm the land. He says, make a home whilst you're in this place of captivity. And alongside that, He says there's hope for a future. So this isn't the end. It might seem like it. You've lost your promised land and this is where you are now. But He says, actually, there's going to be a future for you. And then lastly, He says, I promise to bring you back, not just physically to the land where you are, but also in reputation and prominence in the world as well. So things seem to be going drastically wrong for the Israelites. But as they're being taken away, through the prophet Jeremiah, God sends them this message, and He makes that list of promises to them. How amazing is that? Things seem to be going wrong, but God says, don't worry, I've got a plan. And I want to bring us some encouragement, maybe from these verses this afternoon, because maybe you're in that place where you feel a little bit lost. Maybe you feel like there's no hope. Maybe you're a bit like the Israelites, and maybe if not today, you've already felt like this, or maybe something's going to come along that you're not aware of yet, that maybe is going to raise some doubts in you. But what we're going to do is we're going to take these verses and we're going to see what promise for hope and a future was not only meant for the Israelites back in those days, but for us too, because God's word and his promises are still relevant to us today.
Yeah.
Okay, so recently, you may or may not know, but I have applied to get my minister's status. I know, it's very exciting, but even though it's very exciting, I have felt really nervous about this, and I've actually sat and I've questioned God. So basically, it's me just doing a qualification to say I could do the job that I already do, basically. But I felt really nervous about it. I felt quite timid. I felt worried, and I've actually doubted myself and questioned, God, is this the right thing? Am I choosing the right path? Is it the right thing for me? And I want to say that having made it through the application process and having done the interview, I haven't heard back yet, so I'm still waiting on an email, so prayers appreciated. But I'm trusting that this is the right move for my future. And when it comes to God's plans for our future, I want to say to us, first of all today, that we can go from being timid about them to trusting them. Yeah. We can go from being timid about God's plans for us to trusting them. You see, when I first had the idea to possibly do my minister's status, it was probably about 8-9 years ago. I was expecting Josiah, and I tagged along to a couple I was meant to only go to one of James's sessions when he was doing his training, but I ended up going to 2, and God just sowed this little seed of, you could do this. This could be for you. Are you going to choose this? And I thought, and I sort of simmered with it for the last 8 or 9 years going, and then Pastor Joe came and went, we need a conversation. It's time, exactly, yeah. And actually, having gone through all this process, I've gone from being timid and questioning and worried about the plans to trusting them. And the Israelites would have been filled with fear as they were being taken from their homes and everything they knew. The Israelites had been feeling timid, unsure, shaken up about being taken to Babylon. And even in that, God gives them this promise of this plan of what he's going to do. He says, actually, in this time, you can trust me in the middle of your circumstance. Yeah. The Israelites have seen God's faithfulness at work before, so they can hold on to knowing that if God came through for them before, then he will come through again. And we might look at our lives in that place of fear, we might look at our lives in that place of timidity, and we might look at some of the things we face. They might worry us, they might cause us to shrink back. But God's promise says, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper, not harm. Plans for hope and a future. Those words are still standing strong today. And they are words that we can put our trust in as well. God's plan that he has for you, for me. The more time we spend in God's presence, the more we ask him about the plans, the more we spend time with him, we can learn through his Spirit that we're not meant to face things in a timid manner. Yeah. The Bible says in the book of 2 Timothy, it says we're not called to have a spirit of fear and timidity, but of love, power and self-discipline or sound mind. We can look to God, we can trust him. Yeah. And you might be asking yourself as I'm talking, you might say, well, how can I know the plans that God has for me? How do I know if it's just a good idea? Or how do I know if it's God's plan for me? And the answer is simply to remain in him. Yeah. We need to take time to build ourselves up in his presence. That's why worship and prayer is so important, because it means that we can lean into God, we can trust him, we can learn what his voice sounds like. And it says these words in the book of John 15 and chapter 15 and verse 15. It says, I do not call you servants anymore, because a servant does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything I have heard from my Father. And I think that's really encouraging, that our Heavenly Father has things that he wants to make known to us. He wants us to know things about our lives. He wants us to know the plan. He wants us to go from being timid about the promises that he makes to us to trusting that he's going to do exactly what he promises to do. He promises to lead us into hope and a good future. And he promises to prosper us and not harm us. So first thing, we can go from being timid to trusting. Yeah. Secondly, we can go from searching to security.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I once went on a church weekend away, back when I was in Wakefield in the Methodist church, and we had our church there, let's have a church weekend away, it's going to be great. Now, I was travelling from York, because I was living in York at the time, I was at university, and my mum was like, you've got your card, you know where you're going? I was like, I think so. And I made it all the way to the church weekend away. We had the weekend away, that was great, and it was all good fun. And on the way back, I thought, I'll just go back the way I came. Great, sensible idea. And as I started driving, I suddenly realised I was very, very, very lost. And what I'd done is I hadn't twigged that I needed to take one of the roads, but it was labelled backwards. My brain hadn't quite caught up with me as I was driving along, going, I know I need to be on that road, but that says that and not that. And in my head I had the opposite way round. So what I decided to do was, I thought, right, if I can get on this certain road, it will take me back to my mum and dad's house. And so what I then decided to do was return to York from there. I turned to mum was like, what are you doing here? I was like, well, I got lost, so I thought if I can get here and then know how to get back to university from here. She was like, oh, would you like a cup of tea? Yes, please. I'll have the tea and then I'll go. But I want to say to us, when it comes to God's plans for us, we can go from searching for them, like I was searching for that road, searching for my way home. Yeah. We can go from searching to the security of knowing them. I was searching for my way home, but when I found a good stopping place, I got the security of knowing the way back. For the Israelites, they were being taken captive to a land that was completely different to what they knew. The Babylonians, as we said, they didn't follow the ways the Israelites did. They followed the ways of the world. The Babylonians put their trust and their security in things that the Israelites didn't. And even the Israelites then had been taken away from that place of comfort, and they had to sort of think, where is my security? But God had promised them that even in Babylon, because he said, build your life here, live here whilst we're in this situation. It says you will find my presence. It says in verses 12 to 14, then you will call on me and come and pray to me. I will listen to you. You will seek me. And when you seek me with all of your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. You know, we can look in all kinds of places in our own lives for security or for that hope for the future. Yeah. We might search in many areas for the things that we think are going to make us feel secure. You might find yourself saying, if I can just get through, if only I had X, Y, or Z, if I can just find the right job, if only I had that person, if only I had that amount of money. We've all said that, haven't we? You know, the truth is that these verses remind us that we only need to search in one place for our hope, for that exciting future, and that is in God's presence when we remain in him. We're reminded in Romans 8:28 that we can find our security in God because he works all things together for the good of those who love him. Yeah. He'll show us, he'll reveal our future, as we seek him and as we spend time with him. And in one of the different translations of the Bible, the New Living Translation, it says, well, you will seek me and you will find me. But it uses this word wholeheartedly. And it comes to when we're seeking God, we need to deliberately seek him, not in a haphazard manner, not like going down the street and saying, oh, I hope I bump into somebody, or I hope I see somebody I know. It's not like that. It's a deliberate choice. We've got to seek him wholeheartedly. And as we do this, we'll go from searching for that hope-filled future to the security of living in and knowing God's plans for us. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we did a Tesco order. A couple of weeks ago. And we were here and we got the little notifications on our watches. Your Tesco order is ready. And we went home, waited, and it says, your Tesco order is due around about 8:30. 8:30 came and went. 9:30 came and went. And it got to 10 p.m. and I went, this was the last slot we could get our Tesco shopping delivered. And then James checked his emails and it said, your order has been postponed until tomorrow. We waited for tomorrow morning and then we got an email saying, you are being refunded because your order has been cancelled. It was one of those things. We had an unfulfilled shopping order and the shopping wasn't delivered, and that meant that James and I had to solve the problem of having no food the next morning by nipping to the shop. So that was like, James, you need to get up, please, will you go to the shop, go to the garage and buy some bread and ham, because that's the only place open, because the stuff for the packed lunches the night before hadn't been delivered. It was most upsetting. They just sent them all morning out of kilter. But I want to say to us, why is she telling us this story about shopping? But I want to say to us that as we trust God, as we find our security in Him, when we see things that maybe we think have failed, God has a way and a timing that's going to bring things through to fulfillment. God doesn't want us to solve problems ourselves, but He reminds us to continually seek Him so that He can fulfill His promises to us. We can see sometimes that our plans maybe look like they have failed, but God can take them through to fulfillment. Not like my shopping list and things like that, where I had to solve the problem myself. God actually says, what you think maybe has failed, I can bring you to that place where I can fulfill my promise to you. The Israelites thought that everything in their world had failed, everything in their lives, the things that they knew were being taken from them. God had promised them not only that, but they were being captives and they were prisoners. They didn't have control of their situation, but God sent this message to the prophet Jeremiah to let them know His plan. They simply needed to endure and persevere through those years of captivity to see the fulfillment, the restoration that God had promised them. They come from that place of ruin where everything seemed to be downcast and everything seemed to be going wrong to that place of fulfillment. And you might feel today that you're not where you're meant to be. You might be thinking, I'm on a different path to what I thought I would be. I'm in a different place to where I thought God would have taken me by now. But maybe where we feel we're in that place of ruin or failure, or that place where we think it wasn't meant to be this way, God promises you through these verses, He promises you today that He can bring you to that place of restoration and fulfillment. It says in verse 14, I will be found by you and I will bring you back. I will bring you back from those places, maybe that seem down, far from where you think you're meant to be, and I'll bring you back to that place where you need to be. God is all about fulfilling His promises, and He's all about building people up and restoring us to be all that we're meant to be. We're called for more, and God has promises to give us hope for a future. The fulfillment of promise and restoration of who we are is all about His power and nothing to do with our strength. We just simply have to be willing to listen to God, to trust the process that He wants to take us through so that we can live in that goodness. I want to encourage us today to seek God in maybe those areas that you think have failed. Ask Him to lead you through to that fulfillment place, knowing that He's got plans to prosper you, to give you hope and a future, to bring you back and to restore you. I'm just going to invite James up as I bring this into a close. So when it comes to God's plans, like the Israelites, we can have hope for a future, because if we spend time with God, we'll hear His voice and we'll have that direct access that He promises us to the plans that He has for us. Knowing God, calling on Him, that's going to give us hope, because He always answers us, and we can trust the plans, trust the hope for the future that He has for us. We can experience the security. We can go from that place of feeling like things have failed to fulfillment. For the Israelites, they did go back to Jerusalem. They did go and rebuild the walls through a leader of the Jewish people called Nehemiah. You can read about it in the book of Nehemiah. And I want you to take courage today to know that you too can have hope for a future. And I don't know where you're at today. Maybe you're feeling timid about the plans that God has for you. You need to move to that place of trusting. Maybe you're searching for the plans, You're like me on the road home going, oh, I don't know where I'm going. Today is a good day to find a sensible stopping point so you can find that security that you need. Maybe today you're that person who's feeling like the plans have failed. It wasn't meant to be this way. But today God wants to bring you to that place of fulfillment.